What's up guys, Sean here and welcome back to the channel. Today let's talk about car mods. Car modifications are a hotly debated topic, not just in recent times, but probably for as long as we can remember. While the motoring enthusiast community see car modifications as a quintessential part of car culture, some people see it as a downright danger and menace to society. With such a diverse set of opinions on this matter, I think we should first clear the air on some misconceptions here surrounding car modifications before we come to any conclusions. So let's begin with what exactly counts as a car modification. In the strictest sense of the word, modifications are altering or changing any part of the car at all that did not come as standard from the factory or the dealer. This could be something as simple as just changing out your radial head unit, or as extensive as supercharging or turbocharging a non-turbocharged engine. Now, because modifications as a term covers such a wide range of applications, LTA has actually provided a list that's available online for what modifications are allowed with inspection, and not allowed. Now, obviously, accessory modifications like changing out your radial head unit aren't generally what people think about when they debate about car modifications. So we'll only be focusing on what I call aesthetic and performance enhancing mods today. So on one hand, there are people who simply want to change the appearance of their car and aren't bothered about the performance. Think of it as choosing a nice designer case for your phone or picking out a set of clothes or shoes for yourself. The typical areas that people usually mod are such as the rims, bumpers, grills, bonnets, side skirts, and color schemes. Some may also add additional LED lights here and there, which will either illuminate inside the cabin or shine downwards onto the ground, creating a skirting of light below. Now, striking as they may be, I would say that such mods are generally harmless if they are installed properly. You see, aesthetic mods to me are merely an expression of one's individuality, just like choosing your own wardrobe or getting your hair done. So I urge people not to discriminate against those who simply want to alter the aesthetic of their own vehicle. I mean, even if it's not to everyone's liking, as long as it is done responsibly, they have every right to do so. Now, on the other hand, performance enhancing mods are what everyone is so conflicted about, as there are numerous opinions on the matter. Those who are against it believe that it makes people drive more dangerously or more prone to losing control and simply making our roads less safe. Those who are into it though, well, of course there are the irresponsible ones who simply just want to street race as fast as they can. But the majority of performance enhancing modders are really just people who want a sportier feeling or more confident handling ride without any intention of ever using the full power of the car on the roads. Some of them may even just feel that their car is a bit too underpowered for highway driving, and they want to add a bit more power to feel safer when they are driving with all the faster cars on the road. Now, because this is quite a tricky topic, before we draw any conclusions, let's take a look at the different types of performance mods and what exactly they do. I will classify performance mods into 5 main categories: weight, handling, braking, aerodynamics, and power. Weight is fairly straightforward. A lighter car will be more responsive on the power, have better handling in the corners due to less load on the tires, and generally save more fuel. There are numerous ways to save weight on the car, ranging from lighter wheels to lighter bodywork such as carbon fiber bonnets and hoods, and some cars even have lightened suspension arms available aftermarket, and the list goes on. Potential downsides of weight reducing mods though are that the cheaper options tend to be less durable than those made by reputable companies. Another side effect is that if too much weight is reduced and the suspension is not tuned properly to match, the car could actually become unstable at high speeds. However, this will be quite an extreme case and at very high speeds, but it's still something worth noting. Of course, there are many who also mod their wheels and carbon body panels simply for aesthetic reasons. Handling modifications typically involve the suspension, rims, and tires. These are usually people who find that their original car suspension are either too soft or roll too much in the corners and generally feel less stable and less confident when they are cornering at higher speeds. Tires are also a big factor for handling, as they determine how much grip you actually have when taking corners fast or braking hard, especially in the wet. When all these are actually set up correctly, such modifications actually make a car a lot easier to control, especially at higher speeds, with this actually greatly increasing the safety of the car in general. Of course, there will also be some people who take things to the extreme without knowing how to properly set up a car suspension and end up with a car that's not only less comfortable to drive, but also less controllable in general. Brakes are arguably the most important part of the car to get right, for obvious reasons. And not just from a safety standpoint, but also from a performance standpoint. I mean, it's a no-brainer that if you do not have enough braking power, you will struggle to slow down or stop in time. Especially if you do increase the power and improve the handling of your car, all the more you should upgrade your brakes to provide the additional braking power that you will need to stop. Brake mods can be anything from changing the brake pads and rotors to completely changing the entire braking system to a bigger one. All in all, there are virtually no downsides to having better brakes as long as they are installed properly. Especially with most cars these days having ABS or anti-lock braking systems, you are far less likely to lock up the wheels as a result of having very powerful brakes. Installing aftermarket aerodynamics onto a car is actually a highly technical thing, and more often than not, that aggressive looking wing or diffuser that you are thinking of getting isn't really going to do much more than add some weight and some drag to your car. Performance-wise, aerodynamics is mainly about adding more downforce to generate more pressure between your tires and the ground in order to give you more grip when you are cornering. Increasing downforce, however, has a trade-off, which is actually that it increases aerodynamic drag onto the car. Because of this compromise, aerodynamics are actually required to be very finely tuned for the intended application of the car. Manufacturers spend countless hours and dollars developing their own aerodynamic kits for their cars to suit the application that they believe the car will be used for most of the time. So unless you're buying a piece of aero from a manufacturer that actually did the R&D and actually sells it at a cost that reflects their efforts on this R&D, you're more than likely getting a knockoff that looks similar to the real thing but doesn't really perform even close to it due to how complex aerodynamic design really is. However, if all you're concerned about is how it looks, then go knock yourself out. It doesn't matter to you, right? In which case it becomes an aesthetic mod, and as you know, I have absolutely no problem with that, as long as it's done responsibly. Now, saving the best for last, power enhancing modifications are without a doubt the most contentious one on this list. As the name suggests, it basically involves increasing the power and responsiveness of your engine. To do so, there are actually many different things that can actually be done to increase the power of your engine, ranging all the way from modifying your air intake to the engine itself and its programming, and even to your exhaust. For example, the air intake can be modified to provide a better airflow or even cooler air temperatures for better efficiency, through which more power can be generated. Similarly, exhaust systems can be modified to provide a better flow of exhaust gases, resulting in better efficiency and power delivery as well. In fact, apart from literally increasing the size of the engine itself, the majority of power mods are really about optimizing the efficiency and power output of the existing engine. And these are actually the very same techniques being done by the manufacturers on the higher end models of their cars, which they sell at a higher price. And of course, these higher end models would also have upgraded brakes, upgraded suspension in order to match the increased power that they are giving, which is also pretty much the same idea as the mods that we discussed earlier. So, is there really a reason to increase the power of your engine on your road-going car? Well, I'm probably going to upset quite a few people here, but I would say for the most part, the reality is no, it's not necessary. Especially with how advanced engine technology is these days, there really is no need to do that on a road-going car. Even the cheapest new car available for sale today has more than sufficient power for everyday driving. I can, however, think of two cases where power mods can make sense. The first one applies to cheaper economy cars, which can at times lack a bit of acceleration needed to get out of tricky situations safely, such as having to speed up quickly enough to match a fast-moving stretch of road. Now, an experienced driver will usually know how to plan ahead in such situations, or have the knowledge and ability to manipulate the car in a way that makes it respond quicker than the average motorist. However, for the average motorist, a reasonable amount of extra acceleration on some of the lower power or heavier cars can actually be helpful in keeping them safer on the road. Now, the second use case is actually for the driver who actually enjoys tracking or maybe even racing their car. And when I say racing, I mean responsibly in properly organized races and not some street race that's illegal and shit. Now, while the best case scenario is to actually have a separate off-road car meant strictly for racing or trekking only, not everyone has the luxury of owning more than one car. So for this group of responsible hobbyists, it does make sense as long as it's done responsibly. In fact, this group of hobbyist drivers tend to possess better car control and better reflexes on the road, which overall makes them a safer driver in general. You see, ultimately, a car never drives by itself. It is always operated by a human operator behind the wheel. I mean, even Teslas do not start self-driving without a person activating self-driving mode. So now the big question is, are car mods legal and are they safe? Well, different countries actually have different ideas of what they deem to be acceptable and safe car modifications. So that's why in Singapore, our LTA has their own list of allowed with inspection and not allowed modifications. And all these are available online for you to go and check it out yourself. But in terms of safety, I think it's important for me here to highlight that just because a mod is not legal does not mean it is unsafe. For example, a batch of aftermarket exhaust pipes can be approved by LTA as long as they have been sent for testing and certification by the vehicle manufacturer. However, a subsequent batch of these exact same exhaust pipes manufactured by the same maker will be considered illegal if it was not sent for the same certification by the vehicle's manufacturer. This is in spite of these exhaust pipes being exactly identical to the previous batch. So what this means is that for those cars with lower demand for such aftermarket parts, manufacturers of these parts simply don't find it economical to send these items for certification by the vehicle manufacturer because it simply costs too much for them. It doesn't mean that it is inherently unsafe. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say all this to encourage people to install illegal modifications, none of that. In fact, I strongly urge you not to do it because it is simply against the law and not worth the trouble at all. Why I'm saying all this though is that because people have the wrong impression that car modifications as a whole are dangerous and irresponsible, which is totally not the case. Cars are driven and controlled by people. So if a driver is not capable of handling a 300 horsepower car, there is virtually no difference whether they are driving an illegal but properly modified 300 horsepower car or a completely legal but very expensive 300 horsepower car that came straight out of the showroom. The very crux of the matter really is about driver responsibility, and this has absolutely nothing to do with whether the car has been modified or not. So, should you modify your car? Well, in my opinion, a road legal car will never be a race car. So there really is no point going over the top with performance mods. For those of you who do enjoy trekking cars, I would say some modifications to the handling, the braking, and a bit of engine response and power are perfectly fine as long as they are done responsibly, properly, and within the rules. I believe that it's far more important to learn the correct track driving techniques that will enable a driver to handle a lower powered car at 100% of its potential rather than to have a very powerful car but you are only able to handle it at 50% of its potential. As for aesthetic mods, I believe that as long as within the rules, you have every right to go and knock yourself out because it's your own expression of your individuality, and I think that is perfectly fine as long as it has been done properly and responsibly. So to conclude my thoughts on this topic, this whole discussion of whether car mods are dangerous or not is really just distracting us from the real issue at hand here, which is driver responsibility. I mean, legality aside, does it really make sense to say that a car that, for example, has 120 horsepower and is modified to have 150 horsepower is dangerous and should not be allowed, while at the same time, with enough money, you can easily buy a 300 horsepower car straight out of the door, and somehow that is perfectly safe? I'm sorry, but such thinking really does not make much sense to me. If a driver is reckless and determined enough, it doesn't matter whether their car is modified, stock, powerful, or not powerful. All they need is a blue SG car to cause a major accident. And yes, while I do agree that LTA's regulations or modifications can be updated and improved, it is not something that we can change overnight by constantly shouting and screaming about it. First and foremost, we as drivers need to be responsible as a whole and show that car culture and car modding is in fact a holistic and mature hobby. At the same time, people need to be educated that it is seldom ever the machine itself that causes harm and damage to others, but rather the person behind the machine, irregardless of what it is. So those are my thoughts on car modifications. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And please help me out by giving a like and subscribe below. It costs you absolutely nothing, but it helps me out a ton. And I'll see you guys in the next video.